Welcome back to the NutriMedical Report, and we are joined with Dr. Bob Thiel and his remarkable book we were discussing last week, Barack Obama, Prophecy and the Destruction of the United States. Subtitle is Barack Obama Fulfilling Biblical, Islamic, Catholic, Kenyan, and Other American-Related Prophecies, in question mark, and what about Mitt Romney, question mark. Welcome back, Dr. Bob. Well, today I walked out at the end of the first hour. The TV was on when I was watching the news, and it showed the assemblage of 25 nations doing a mine-sweeping operation, a major operations, while a jet streamed off the front of an aircraft carrier in the Gulf at the Strait of Hormuz. What could be more timely than to have a 12-day exercise in the Gulf, the Persian Gulf, at the Strait of Hormuz with this book that you've just published? No wonder it's shot to the top of the bestseller list at Amazon and Amazon Kindle. It's very timely.
Well, that was the intent. We wanted it to come out when people would be interested in. And of course, so many things going on in the United States and in the Middle East, and even in Europe. Actually, since the book has come out already,
right.
It's made a lot of people have interest in this subject more than maybe they would otherwise. Right.
So. Tell us about some of the other major factors. Last week we went over a few of them. There are a number of prophecies. The thing is that I like about your book, it doesn't just cover Christian prophecy. It covers Islamic prophecies, Catholic, Kenyan, and other American-related prophecies. It also shows that Obama is fulfilling a role which is literally the transformation of the United States. And as I mentioned in the first hour, there's a linkage between QE3 and the printing of money, because 87% of the world currency, printed dollars and electronic dollars, is the U.S. Now with the infinite QE3, it'll soon be over 90%, 95%, and of course with the collapse of the world currency, they're going to roll us over to a biometric world currency, otherwise known as the mark of the beast, where only divots in their system of supercomputers is considered real money and anything else is considered a crime. We have a war pending in the Middle East, which means it's going to precede almost certainly some form of peace treaty after some level of destruction. It means that we're heading very rapidly toward the time of Jacob's trouble, and Obama has a major role in that. So let's go over some of the points that you have in your book.
Okay, well, yeah, you've gone through quite a few different things right there. Right now, related to the peace deal, the Bible talks about a peace deal. At least most people who look in the book of Daniel believe a peace deal is likely to happen. And normally we don't see peace deals anywhere, but specifically in the Middle East without a war first. So the U.S. has been doing things, Israel's doing things, others are doing things, the Brits are doing things. The Canadians actually pulled out their embassy personnel a week or two back out of Iran. So
which means we're ready to bomb them. When you stop negotiating, you pull back your embassy staff and you eject all the Iranians. It means we're now in a pre-war setting.
Yeah, that's the way I took it. Of course, they don't say it that way, but
the Canadians are vassals to the U.S. administration, whichever Democrat or Republican. And if Mr. Baer, the foreign minister, defense minister for Canada, did this, it's because he's been advised we're getting ready to do an air attack on Iran. And of course, it also means Syria, because Syria is a backdoor to Iran. So, very dangerous and stupid move.
Yeah, they're both Syria and Iran are really attached to each other. And what's been interesting with the whole Iranian situation is, from a Western perspective, we see Iran, and it's like, come on, Iran, how many times are you not going to let the nuclear inspectors inspect? And so a month or two back, it looked like, okay, they're going to let them in again, and supposedly that's going to be fine. Of course, people in Israel have said, nah, this is all just delaying tactics. They just want you people to delay. They're not serious. And the world community's like, oh, Israel, you're wrong. They're willing to talk to us. So what do we do? What happens? What happens is, of course, the UN wants to do it again, and Iran is like, no, we don't really think you should. But we thought this is what you agreed to. Well, that isn't exactly what we thought we agreed to. So we're seeing that, and as a Western perspective, you think, why would Iran be so belligerent? I mean, why? Don't they know that Israel may attack them, the United States may bomb them? And the reason
having weapons prevents you from being attacked. Even the threat that you might have weapons. This is the very reason why Saddam Hussein wasn't completely taken over in the first Gulf War, is because they feared he'd actually use the weapons which he's holding back. When he removed the weapons and they thought they were gone, they moved to Syria. Then we had Gulf II. Gulf II couldn't happen until after those nasty weapons were out of Iraq.
Well, three things on that. First, Syria is believed to have launched the firing systems, at least, for chemical weapons last month. That was in the paper about 2 days ago. But as far as getting back to Iran and my book warns that, according to Iranian interpretations of prophecy, they need to cause chaos, to cause a leader called the Imam Mahdi to rise up. Now, this is an Islamic leader, and while I don't think Iran's going to get quite the leader that they want, there is a biblical figure called the King of the South who might tie into this.
Right. In other words, it may be the caliph or caliphate that there are the Muslim Brotherhood. In fact, the comments by Mr. Mohammed Morsi are kind of saying, hey, if you didn't have such good relations with Syria, we could have better relations with you. This is the latest comment by Mohammed Morsi, the new elected Muslim Brotherhood leader of Egypt. That's very telling, isn't it?
Yes, it is. But to bring us back to Barack Obama, which you'd asked me before, and I've mentioned this in the past on your show, there's a prophecy from the 15th century. It's a Shiite prophecy. That's the type of Muslims most of the Iranians are. And it tells of a time when a, quote, tall black man will assume the reins of the government in the West. Now, first, let's just stop there for just a moment. Since this prophecy came out, there's never before been a tall black man who assumed the reins of the government in the West. Western nations have never had, at least significant ones, have never had a black leader. So that's interesting. And then it says he's going to be commanding, quote, the strongest army on earth. Well, the strongest army on earth, as far as I can tell, and what you've said to me privately as well as on the air, is that of the United States.
Yeah, America's Navy, for example, just looking at the throw weight, our Navy, in terms of its actual weight, just the weight of our ships, is more than the 17 largest following nations. That means Russia, China, Britain, France, Spain. In other words, you take the top 17 nations after us, and they still don't equal our weight of our Navy. That's just one measure.
Yeah, the U.S. is definitely the strongest military on the planet. So anyway, so this is centuries-old Shiite prophecy that says that this leader, this Iranian desired leader, the Imam Mahdi, is supposed to rise up when there's this tall black man who runs the government in the earth. That's got the government in the West has got the strongest army. Well, whether or not anybody believes anything about this prophecy in the United States, if enough Iranians do, and I suspect that some do, they may decide that they need to cause the Imam Mahdi to rise up during the time of President Obama. And what's also related to this, and I do go to this into my in the book, there's another Iranian prophet or Shiite Muslim prophecy, or actually the Sunnis as well, that the belief is that the Imam Mahdi will rise up in an even-numbered year. And you say, well, this year is 2012, so therefore this is an even-numbered year, and that's supposed to rise up. Well, kind of. Basically, it's based on the Muslim year. And the Muslim year starts in November, by the way, in case your listeners were unaware of that. The current year is 1433, and it ends on November 14th, 2012. And the new year starts November 15th, 2012. So that'll be the year 1434. So that will be an even-numbered year. Well, tying all this to Barack Obama prophecy and all the rest, you've got the president of Iran, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who basically believes that his job is to cause Imam Mahdi to rise up before he leaves office, and he's supposed to leave office at the end of the Muslim year 1434, and so therefore, if his predictions are right, he's supposed to want to cause a war within the next 14 months. On the other side of the break, we talk about another prophecy we talked about again, and perhaps destruction of the United States.
And we're coming back with remarkable Dr. Bob Thiel in his book, of course, Barack Obama Prophecy and the Destruction of the United States. You've done what we call a very analytical look at this. As I tell people, keep your skepticals on, but when you look at all these prophecies lining up, you cover everything from the Catholic to the Nostradamus prophecies to the Christian ones, all kinds of them all over the world, and they all say things that are all kind of making sense of what's going on with our current history. It also, as I said before, unless something really happens to screw things up, I see a re-election of Obama. I see the campaign of Mitt Romney being run very poorly. He doesn't demonstrate any fire, even though he makes statements he supports the middle class. One of the biggest disasters is our health care, and Obama's brought in Obamacare. Even if it's screwed up, he's tried to do something. And it's also got some very evil parts of it, including the abortion and other issues. The fact is the average American is terrified about health care problems. 2/3 to 3/4 of the people who go bankrupt will go bankrupt because they have a health problem in their family. Then we have the management of the economy. People are worried they're going to be thrown under the bus under an austerity fascism regime, under Romney, etc. And then we have the sneakiness with Israel. He doesn't want to make an overt statement supporting Israel, because if they do a preemptive attack and it goes south, he could lose re-election. So Obama's playing a politic of this very, very much more clever than Mitt Romney. Mitt Romney is a novice from what I can see in terms of his PR campaign, etc. He really is running his campaign almost to lose. And that means if Obama is back in, let's feed into all of these analysis of all these prophecies, because you've got lots to say today.
Well, one of a couple of them. A lot of people are surprised if I talk about biblical and non-biblical prophecies that talk about the destruction of the United States. But first of all, as many of your listeners I think are aware, Barack Obama's father was Kenyan,
right,
and from a tribe called the Low Kenyans. And there was actually a Low Kenyan prophecy that says that a leader from their own people, a son of a Low Kenyan basically, will lead to or cause the destruction of the United States. And that's kind of interesting, since, we've got a Low Kenyan son who is the President of the United States. But on a biblical perspective, and I was watching another prophetic commentator on television, I think, since I saw you last, and he made some comment about prophecy in the United States, but for some reason he missed the one that you and I talked about last time, which I think is a very significant one. And that is that in Daniel chapter 11, verse 39, it talks about the king of the north, and that he's going to go against the strongest fortresses and divide the land for gain. Now, if you read other passages in that prophecy, it says it's for the appointed time, the time of the end, and all that kind of stuff. And if we are in the end times, and I happen to believe that we are, getting back to the strongest armies on earth, well, I would think that the nation with the strongest fortresses on earth would have to be the United States. And while Americans don't think this is possible, I think there's enough both going on morally in the United States, many things going around the world that most people don't have a clue about, that are actually setting up the U.S. for destruction. And it's unfortunate that more and more people don't know about the prophecies. They don't know about what's going to happen. You mentioned earlier also a little bit about QE3 for your listeners. QE stands for quantitative easing. Now, if everybody could go and counterfeit money in their backyard, everybody would be a millionaire, a billionaire, whatever, really quick. But most people would figure out, look, if everybody can just print up money, nobody would go to work, and we wouldn't have anything.
Yeah.
Just printing up money doesn't actually make anything. And so what the quantitative easing program is, since it's a term that normal people wouldn't really use, is basically a way the government invents money. They just decide we're going to print money, and the asset that they purchase with this money is a piece of paper from the U.S. government says that we will pay you back. A treasury bill is basically how it's backed. Occasionally, some mortgages
funny money created. Funny money created out of thin air. What it's doing is it's laying the groundwork for the mark of the beast. If you go from 87% of the world currency, electronic or otherwise, to say 95 or 98% in the next 2 or 3 years, and you cause massive worldwide hyperinflation, you've got a situation now where you're going to have to replace it with a new world virtual currency that's electronic and biometric. And that tells me that if we get a second term of Obama, he's laying the groundwork for literally the mark of the beast. And I'm going to say this is an absolute, not even open for discussion. The mark of the beast will come from the United States of America, period. Not from Europe, not from Russia. It will come from the United States.
Well, you and I have a difference of opinion on that, as you know, because I believe it's going to be European. But I do believe...
No, it won't be European. The European will just be a vassal of it. See, the European Central Bank went a week before they did the QE3, because where do you think they're going to get all that money? They don't have enough. They cannot print enough euro currency because it's a small currency and it'll inflate very quickly. If they print $20 trillion in America, do you know how much it inflates the total amount of money that's already printed? It has almost no effect. It's insignificant. They can't print enough euros. The euro is tied to it. The European is part of it, and yes, they're going to have branches of the system, but the supercomputers that manage the world currency system, even though there are going to be nodes in London and Belgium and elsewhere, the central node is America. I visited. I was actually one of their Q-level clearance doctors. This isn't even open for discussion. I took care of employees that were working on the virtual world project in the mid-'90s, almost like 17 years ago. So, no, it's America. This is not even something that people should realize. Just look at America's power. If you knew the occult power of all the fancy weapon systems that the other nations know or don't know we have, America, literally, as it says in the Bible, can rain fire down from heaven. We have the plasma weapons of Nikola Tesla. We can create 100 million megaton nuclear explosion over a city, a nuclear-like explosion, with a plasma weapon that can create superheated air to 100 million degrees over any city within minutes without firing a missile. Anywhere. We can create geotectonic explosions and cause tectonic plates to break anywhere on the planet. We have the tectonic weapon. We literally have weapons that can strip the ozone layer over a specific area of the world and literally fry them from space just by opening up the rent in the ozone layer. We have all these weapons. So literally, the man in the White House is the king of Earth right now. And that's the thing that people don't understand, and they're moving. People think we're heading toward a depression. No, we're heading toward the mark of the beast. And yes, so Europe is going to be part of the system, and so will China and Russia. In fact, there's a lot of jockeying as to how they're going to have exchangeable currencies, because the Chinese are just printing money that's not exchangeable. Neither is the ruble. The only exchangeable currency for the whole world is the dollar. And it's not going to be replaced. It's going to be transformed into the mark.
Well, as you know, I think that the U.S. may find it's going to inflate its dollar too much, and the world.
Well, it doesn't matter though, because if you're making if you have QE3 and in a year another $1 trillion, another 2 or 3 years could be $10 trillion. If you have 95% of the world currency are now in U.S. dollars, the Chinese can't sell anything to us unless they have an exchangeable currency with us or take our dollars.
Well, the Chinese are trying to take steps right now to trade directly with the Russians, to trade directly with...
That's a stopgap. That won't do anything. The Russians don't have a real economy except an oil economy, and they only have it if they sell the oil to other nations that have a real economy. So they're stuck. America and the banksters in London have total control of the world financial system, and it's going to get a lot worse before it becomes the mark. Welcome back, and the interesting discussion that we're talking about off air about the announcement today about Barack Obama. Tell us about that, and this can kind of fit in prophetically too.
Well, what happened was Barack Obama, when he was speaking at Loyola University on October 19th, 1998, made some comments suggesting he wants to redistribute wealth. And okay, fine, I heard about that this morning. And USA Today online, I see an article here from David Jackson, and the headline is, White House, Obama is not a redistributionist. And what's interesting, and let me read to your listeners the same thing I read to you off air. It said, quote, the White House said today that the release of 14-year-old tape of Barack Obama discussing redistribution reflects desperation from supporters of Mitt Romney. Quote, all of us who follow politics and policy have seen circumstances like this where a campaign is having a very bad day or week, said White House spokesman Jay Carney. Quote, and in circumstances like that, there are efforts made, and sometimes desperate efforts made, to change the subject, end quote. Now, what I found astounding about this is two things. One, the White House did not say Barack Obama was not a redistributionist.
Yeah.
That was David Jackson from the USA Today who wrote that. I mean, maybe there's more to this part of the story, but I mean, I'm reading what what Jackson just posted online.
They just changed the subject, is what Jay Carney did. They didn't want to respond by making a direct response because it could be quoted, and then they could clarify it in some later interview to say, Mr. Obama, do you not believe in redistribution? Of course he does. He wants to believe the same thing that's been tried already in the Northeast United States, where they had what's called fairness in wages, where they would tell an industry, you can't pay $12 an hour, you got to pay $22. And if you do that, when you have a closed-up industry where you have fixed prices and fixed expenses, you can force a lot of businesses right out of business. Unless you're going to top up on the other side and say, no, okay, you incur a loss business because you're doing this fairness in wages, we'll top you up. Where are they going to get the money? They're going to print it, because they don't get it from taxes. They have to print it, which is an inflatocracy. And we have this from the United States. In fact, in your last chapter, you mentioned that Obama is basically bankrupting the U.S., doubled the debt, by the way, hurting its military, trying to do a 90% reduction to build down of our nuclear forces, causing civil unrest by race and class warfare, risking its food supply by not taking off this crazy ethanol gasohol thing, and also closing down the access to gas fields, etc. And I don't believe in allowing hydrofracking in areas that are dangerous, going to affect water supply, but offshore Alaskan oil and licenses for oil exploration that's in safe areas off the Gulf of Mexico, they should allow.
Well, since this is the NutriMedical report, the other thing that I mentioned in the book, and we've chatted about this in the past as well, is he's been an advocate of GMOs, genetically modified organisms, in food supply, and I think that's dangerous for not only the health of the country but the food supply itself. Well,
monocrops are GMO. Number one, you don't get a proper organogenesis of the child or adult. You actually end up eventually with sterility. If you take rats and you expose them, they're smaller, they have abnormal testicles and ovaries, they end up with abnormal brain development, mental development, microcephaly, enlarged dementa, increased cancer rates, increased sterility, and increased maldigestion and premature death. GMO food isn't just a for-like food. It actually has new biological molecules and organic acids that are toxic to the biology of humans because they're totally foreign. These are not normal foods. They're like foods from a different dimension or a different universe, a different planet. It's not coming from the planet Earth. This is from the planet GMO.
Well, what people don't realize is a lot of these GMO crops are specifically engineered to survive certain pesticides. That's why they changed them. So you got to think about this. There are crops that have, I'm going to call it, for lack of argument, a Roundup gene. Now, Roundup is this pesticide that Monsanto produces, and basically, Roundup kills just about everything that grows. And so, would you want to actually eat a plant that Roundup doesn't kill? I mean, the plant has been altered dramatically because a natural plant couldn't survive this chemical onslaught.
Well, they gave Mon 80 corn to gerbils, and they had purple scrota and started growing hair on the inside of their mouth and had decrease in brain size, a mental enlargement, premature blindness, and death. I mean, it does all kinds of gene switching because these organic acids and genes are unstable, and they get inside the person. They also can convert particular bowel bacteria to actually become, we call, bioengines. They start developing all kinds of molecules totally unintended by even the GMO people because these genes are not nailed down. They're actually gene cassettes that are shot in with a gold biogun into the organism to actually create this unstable gene complex to cause unrestrained gene expression. And they can cause unbelievable things to happen that, right out of Dr. Moreau's lab.
Well, and then there's milder but also negative things that happen. Like, for example, with the GMO corn stuff, because of that, milkweed doesn't grow as much as it did. And you say, so what? Well, as it turns out, monarch butterflies need the milkweed for part of their reproduction and life cycles. So now, up where I live, which is near Pismo Beach here, we actually have monarch butterflies come here, and it's a big tourist draw from November till about February. And there are less of them, and one of the reasons, it's not the only reason, but one of the reasons there are less of them is because of GMO crops. And the people who did the GMOs, they never tested to see could this affect the other part of the ecology and the environment. They just said, well, if we give it to this rat, it doesn't cause this type of cancer, therefore it must be safe. And, I don't know why humans think they know more about God than making food, but that's what they're trying to do, and that's what they've been doing.
Well, we have a leadership here that's totally either evil or ignorant. You have some interesting things in Chapter 4. You talk about Barack Obama's name. And, of course, we've talked about this in the show with other guests, that Barack Obama basically means lightning fallen from heaven. And if anybody knows their Bible, that sounds awfully familiar with one of the subtitles for Satan or his minions.
His name is interesting, and when I was mentioning the Shiite prophecy before about the tall black man who rises up, in Persian, supposedly, Obama, as three separate words, means he is with us. And the old Shiite prophecy for the 1500s says that that this tall black man, when he rises up, it'll be a sign that he is with us. And the fact that his last name, at least in Farsi Persian, means he is with us, I thought it was also an interesting coincidence. And again, even if someone made up this prophecy, even if it was somebody who invented it and pretended it was centuries old, as long as enough Shiite Muslims believe it, or even non-Shiite Sunni Muslims believe that their leader is supposed to rise up when there's a tall black man in charge of the strongest armies on the planet, this can cause, as is told, the term a self-fulfilling prophecy. So we've got a situation now where his name kind of ties into it, his appearance tends to tie into it, and we're seeing a lot of things going on in the Middle East. And I think part of this is why Iran has been as stubborn, from a Western perspective, as they have been on this whole nuclear inspection. Because
exactly,
I think they want to make enough chaos to have their great leader rise up. And I think they're looking at the signs and say, oh, these are just proof that they're right.
Exactly, yeah. You have some interesting Catholic prophecies here, and we know that according to the Malachi prophecies, that it's almost certain that there's one more pope, the Petrus Romanus. We've had experts talking about that. It appears also that if Obama gets reelected, which is more than likely because it's 7-8 lead right now, point in the lead, and we're only 6 weeks away, is that he will be around when the final pope shows, because Pope Benedict is pretty old. He was born,
matter of fact, by the time, presuming Barack Obama is reelected and his term ends, the Pope will only be a few months shy of age 90. And the Pope already has occasionally dropped hints that perhaps Pope should be able to retire, by the way, and that he's starting to feel his age.
Right.
And not that many people live to be 90, so there is a real possibility that the final Pope will, or at least the one who fulfills that may fulfill that Malachi prophecy.
Well, or you can be taken with a medical problem like a stroke or something else where you can't function. I think we're looking at a gentleman that I consider the best candidate I've ever seen for, I call the false prophet. I know a lot of people didn't think of him as a religious leader, but in a way he is. He's a secular religious leader for a new dialogue of false peace that fits in perfectly with the idea that the final pope will be present here, probably during his second term, and that there'll be a dialogue with the leaders of the East that will bring forth the final system. Welcome back to the NutriMedical Report. As I mentioned on the break, Syria has the largest storehouse of VX nerve gas and RDX of any other nation besides America. That means that an attack on Syria is very stupid.
Well, Syria, I think, wants the world to know that in case it does get attacked, it's going to hit back very, very hard.
The idea of just going in there and bombing it is asinine.
Well, except that if they do something that's very bold or in violation of most international agreements, such as the use of chemical weapons, there's a prophecy in the book of Isaiah 17:1 talking about Damascus will cease being a city, become a ruinous heap. And people can debate when that may happen, but let me say when it didn't happen. It hasn't happened since that prophecy was written.
Yeah, right. In fact, we talked with Tim Alexander, whose brother has been there, and he's been there to Damascus in a bowl. So one big nuke in that bowl will just wipe out everything. And we know that someday it's going to happen.
Right, we know it's going to happen, and, I'm not saying it's going to happen this year, but it certainly there's the possibility does exist. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the segment earlier, that was that, Syrians test launched or test-fired last month the ability to determine that they could actually send shells out with chemical weapons. So they just retested this just a few weeks ago. It was just in the news this week.
Yeah, I think that's very stupid on the part of the Syrians to doing this. Saber rattling, it's good. It's just like with the Israelis. Keep your nuclear weapons shined up and underground, because if they start using them, things are going to get very, very insane. And by the way, Israel doesn't just have Syrian countries and Iran targeted. If Russia is directly backing the attack against Israel, Moscow is literally on the same second and minute, on the same latitude as the Temple Mount Moriah. It's 2,000 miles north, which means a missile could take out Moscow from Israel.
Well, at this instant, so far, my general view about Russia in this whole situation has been that Russia will blink.
I think so too, because
it's blinked occasionally, and it likes Syria, but I don't think it likes it that much.
It'll blink to the extent that at least it'll blink temporarily, because a peace treaty has to be brought in. And partitioning of the state of Israel is one of the prophetic things. As I mentioned before, you have to partition the state, start the Temple Mount sacrifice with the Jews, which, by the way, they only need a tabernacle of Moses, which the people at the Tabernacle Foundation told me they already have. They have the Kohanim, the Kalal, they got everything. They literally have a call tomorrow, if there was a Feast of Tabernacles, could have a sacrifice there with the red heifer, which is genetically engineered, growing in Switzerland and in Israel. They could have the red heifer there and do the blood sacrifice on the Temple Mount on the right date after erecting a tabernacle overnight. Literally overnight.
They have the ability. They have they call it a portable altar, but even though it's made out of stone, it's unhewn stones.
Right.
They've had this done for a couple of years now. They have the Levitical priests in training. They have their version of the Sanhedrin. They have all these kinds of things. Because I actually contacted the Sanhedrin over there to verify all this a few years back. And as you correctly said, they don't feel they need to have a temple to do it. They'd like to have a temple, and they might get
eventually.
one.
Eventually they could have one, but the blood sacrifice will start. Now, by the way, imagine if you're a Muslim and you already believe Muhammad replaced the need for the Jews and even the Christians and said they got it all wrong, and now you got these Jews doing blood sacrifice. It was said that at the time of Jesus that the population would swell up to 1.7 million people in the surrounding area, and the stench of blood from the sacrificing animals with the blood running down the center of the streets of Jerusalem was mind-boggling. So people need to kind of get their mind wrapped around this of just how long the Muslims will put up with a blood sacrifice in the Feast of Tabernacles, and how long things will stay stable before they rip apart.
Well, the Feast of Tabernacles actually goes on every year, and that would be this year. It's in October, but they don't have the blood at Passover time. They don't.
Yeah, they're not going to do that. No, but what I'm saying is that the tabernacle sacrifice would set the stage for it. Set the stage for the things that are happening. In fact, if you actually know that the first day of the tribulation starts on the Feast of Tabernacles, it's exactly one halfway through the 7-year period of 360-day years at the Feast of Passover. Isn't that interesting? And in fact,
there's different views. Some believe that the Great Tribulation will start by the fall Jewish holy days. Others believe that it will start around the spring holy days. And there's arguments for both.
Yeah, if you actually read my book, Clay and Iron, which will be bringing out the first of the trilogy, Upgrades and Uprights, it actually explains that the timeline is Feast of Tabernacles, start of the last 7 years, that the sacrifices stopped 130 days, which is exactly 30 days before Passover. There's 5 months of death and destruction from that date, which is the 5 days where death will flee from them, and exactly the Feast of the Long Blowing, which is called the Feast of Trumpets, which is exactly 2,520 days after the Feast of Tabernacles. Is
that was
the
Monday
feast
this week, by the way. Go ahead.
Yeah, and that day, by the way, will be the end of the 7 years. And if you take the 17th day of Heshvan, which is the time when people have to be kind of sequestered away from destruction, it's exactly the same day as the olive branch was received back by the dove by Noah in his ark at the end of the destruction by water, and this is the destruction by fire. So the 17th day of Heshvan says, blessed are those that live to this particular day, the 17th of Heshvan. So I've shown that specifically in Clay and Iron. So what I am telling people in advance is that there's 3 things to watch for: partitioning of the state, blood sacrifice in the tabernacle that's portable, and a peace treaty that guarantees at least a 7 or 7-year period of change of peace, a period of peace that's going to be broken in the middle with the blood sacrifice cut off 30 days before Passover.
Yeah, we're going to see a 7-year deal. It probably will be in the fall of the year, and in the middle of it, 3.5-year time frame, basically.
Which will be Passover, which it fits perfectly with Passover being the time when Jesus was sacrificed. It fits in with the Passover date. So these Jewish dates, these Hebrew dates, which precede, they're both Jewish and Hebrew, are prophetic, and they're very important. That's why Messianic Christians, and I'm one of them, understand some things that Christians who don't want to study these, who don't understand them, will not understand why these things are timed, because there's in a sense, Ephraim includes the Christians. Ephraim includes the lost tribes that became apostate and were cast off by the Assyrians. And God's going to deal with these two houses of Israel again in the end times. That's why it's not just the time of Jacob's trouble, it's the time of the trouble of Ephraim as well.
Well, Ephraim is actually one of the sons of Jacob. Jacob adopted Joseph's sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, and said, "You'll be our sons like Judah or Reuben was my son."
Right.
And so that ties into the time of Jacob's trouble.
Yeah, exactly. So let's go to some of the other final steps here. This is pretty amazing. So what about Nostradamus? What does he say about all of this?
Well, Nostradamus actually... his writings are a little different.
Their quatrains are confusing, basically.
Well, there's a couple of views on why he wrote them that way. One is so he wouldn't get killed.
Yeah, good reason.
For your listeners, Nostradamus was a Catholic seer. Some Catholics distance themselves from him, and others say, well, no, he was a Catholic, and he had visions and whatever, and he would write them down. But he basically. He talked about that America is going to reign and hold power in the sky and land, and shall never perish under Asian forces until 7 pontificates have passed. Now, this is from a Catholic book. I cite this in my book, but this is actually from a Catholic writer.
Right.
And he basically said that the following. He says, "I think it's from the reign of Pius XII that the 7 pontificates must be counted, and this brings us to the last pope, according to St. Malachi's list, when the world ends." And that's from Yves Dupont, who wrote a book on Catholic prophecy. So that was his analysis of that particular Malachi.
Sure.
Excuse me.
So where would that place us in terms of where would that place us with our current Pope Benedict?
Well, that would mean he's the 6th, and 6th or 7th. So there's only one left.
I think there's a lot of convergence on the idea that we think that the Malachi prophecies have been proven correct for so long. All of these basically are kind of converging on a central truth that we are at the time of not the end of the world, but the end of the aeon, the end of the age, and that God is asking us to repent right now because our current resident in the White House, the abomination, is in prophecy. And if you get this book, Barack Obama Prophecy and the Destruction of the United States, your eyes will be opened. You can go back to the scriptures and you'll see other references to other prophecies that are just amazing. No wonder it's very popular. I got my book as I ordered it before you even had your copies from the printer, and it's getting dog-eared now. We have to have you back on soon, Dr. Bob Thiel, as this unfolds. And in the next 6 weeks, we're going to find out if we're going to have more of Obama in the second term, which I expect to happen.